because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are. And we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a movie podcast, and my name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we're going to talk a bit about Nicolas Cage and the 1988 Robert Bierman movie, Vampire's Kiss.
Alva! What could be easier? It's all alphabetical. You just put it in the right file, according to alphabetical order. You know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Peter.
H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P,
Peter.
Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z! Huh? Hey, I'm a vampire. I'm a vampire! 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 I'm a vampire!
Which, at the time, and for a long time, was just completely panned by critics and audiences as well. And
We love it.
we do love it. We're
We
going to try
love
to
it.
defend it. Try to say a little bit about what we think is going on in the movie and why it works for us. But I mean, I think it's an uphill battle because I think this movie was, is basically remembered today outside of a few people now who are trying to sort of revisit it, including us. It's just remembered as a movie where Nick Cage recites the alphabet and runs around screaming, "I'm a vampire" over and over again. And
Which on this, how is that not a selling point for me? But-
yes, but if you're coming to this movie thinking, oh, I liked Nick Cage in Moonstruck.
Mhm.
He was kind of weird, but he was lovable, and then maybe, I don't know if you're coming to it from later on, and you're like, I thought he was great in Leaving Las Vegas. He won an Academy Award, and then you come to this movie and it's just not what you
It's like
might
on another planet.
you might have thought. And it is remarkable that Nicolas Cage, he does this movie and it's such a expressionistic and challenging thing that he's trying to do with his character, and the tone of the movie as well, which is utterly black comedy. And yet, then this is the same guy, Nicolas Cage, who goes on to, do it now as a kind of a parody of himself. And he just does like 6 movies a year and doesn't seem to, he's just sleepwalking through his movies. But I think that's what's really so exciting about this movie is that this movie was done at a time when Nicolas Cage, right at that really sweet spot where he had some clout, he had a well-regarded performance in Moonstruck and some other things early on, and he was ready to kind of open up and do something really special. And then he chooses to do this movie, and I think a lot of people were like, "What?" They just were really surprised. The other thing that we're going to talk about is I think this movie pairs really nicely with the recent Kitty Green movie, The Assistant, which is now streaming on Hulu.
You're relatively new to the company,
I mean, I've been working here for nearly 2 months.
and you're under a lot of stress. Entry-level jobs in this industry are tough, right? Long hours? First one in, last one out.
Good night.
You're smart. You have to be smart. It's a tough job, but I can see that you've got what it takes.
They both portray the same thing, which is an assistant who is terrorized by her boss. But they show the story from the opposite sides. So Vampire's Kiss is told from the perspective, in some cases radically from the perspective of Peter Lowe, who's played by Nicolas Cage. And The Assistant is told entirely from the perspective of Jane, who's played by Julia Garner. And you actually don't even ever see her boss.
The boss in question, right? Yeah.
You only kind of hear his voice over the phone. So it's very much from the two perspectives. And so in that sense, I think that it plays really nicely.
Yeah, they're a really good pairing.
Okay, so let's start with Vampire's Kiss. So if you haven't seen it, we're going to try to sell you on seeing this movie. Of course, even after you listen to this and you think, maybe I like that, I don't know, maybe I'll give it a try, and then you try it, there's no guarantee you're going to like it. I mean, it's in many respects the strangest movie we've covered on this podcast and probably will cover.
Although not the strangest Nick Cage movie we watched.
Oh, right.
I wouldn't say.
Well, okay, good. So why don't we say a little bit about the context in which we watched this movie?
Yeah.
Because I think that's so we had never seen this movie until last year when we were doing a Nicolas Cage sort of marathon and watching. I think in the end I watched 26 Cage movies, which sounds like a lot, but it's like a fraction of his filmography. I think he's made over 100 movies.
So like 3 summers ago, I imposed what I called the Summer of Cruise on Justin, which we did Tom Cruise movies all summer long. And the summer after that, we decided to do Raging with Cage. And that was definitely Justin's choice. I liked it a lot. It was really fun. There's a lot more range with Nick Cage than there are with Tom Cruise movies.
Yeah, this is
the context in which we watched and ranked 26 Nick Cage movies over the course of the summer.
That's right. And so this came weirdly, I think, early on in our Cage watch.
It did.
And we were both kind of blown away by it. But also because, I mean, watching it in the Cage context is actually really a nice way to do it, I think. Because you start to see, you see things choices that he's making that are working from movie to movie. And this movie is, in a way, I mean, he said this himself, is the text for all of his subsequent performances. This was his laboratory of acting, and what he was trying to, what he was doing here, he would then draw on in other films later. And I think that is really clear, like in movies like Bad Lieutenant, where some of the more expressionistic, over the top things that he's doing in that movie like that, or Wild at Heart, or even like Raising Arizona, which happens just that's like the next year. Those were some of my favorite ones that we watched. But this one was my favorite.
He's pulling from a number of different inspirations. I mean, for this movie, I think he explicitly said it was German expressionism.
Yeah, well, and that's also in the movie too, because they have all these shots from Nosferatu that are directly quoted.
And for Knight Rider, it's like
Ghost Rider.
I always call it Knight Rider. I don't know why.
Knight Rider is the car thing with Hasselhoff.
That means nothing to me.
Okay.
I don't know any of the things that you just said.
Okay.
Who's Hasselhoff?
He's the Hoff, man. David Hasselhoff.
Okay, well, that clarified it. He said it was like shamanism, right?
Yeah, Nouveau shamanism is what he was
Nouveau
going for.
shamanism.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he's like pulling from these other traditions. Kabuki, I think, is another of his inspirations. So it doesn't look like anything that anybody else is doing.
Yeah, especially in a movie like this, in Vampire's Kiss, where it's just ostensibly a comedy with certain sort of dramatic, dark elements to it. Including rape and sexual assault and psychological terrorism, right? But the tone of the movie is inscrutable, I think, in a way. And I think that's partly what turns audiences off, is that there's these horrible things happening and they're not shying away from them. And yet it's funny. And part of that is because Cage is so dialed into this, what he's trying to do. But you're right that it's not any attempt at naturalism. It's not any attempt to portray a real human being going through a real human being's problems. It's rather an embodiment, I think, of an emotion, or maybe that's just that, an emotional state of just feeling a feeling of depression, a feeling of loss, a feeling of hopelessness, of malaise. And he's embodying all of these emotions, and I think that's what he's trying to convey. And it's I don't think realism or this being a real person matters at all to him. I mean, there are just moments in this movie that are inexplicable if you try to think of it through the lens of, oh, he's a real person. Like, just moments where he's just like destroying his apartment building, his apartment room for no reason, right? He's just like smashing stuff up. And there's moments where he's just, walking down the street after having bit a woman and drank her blood and we learn killed her. So he's got like blood all over him, and he's just walking down the street carrying a stake that he's going to use to try to kill himself, like a giant wooden stake. And he's just kind of like lilting down the street. And I mean, it's not. I think realism. If you drop the lens of realism, and suddenly the movie starts to open up a little bit, I think. And then when you put all the other characters in the movie who are playing it basically real,
right?
Then it's interesting because then you sort of see that like, okay, so they're playing real people and like he's not, and now they're interacting, and how is that interaction working, and like how are they reacting to this person who's not a real person? It starts to like get more complex and more interesting, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the character of Alva, who he's systematically torturing throughout this movie for no reason at all.
No reason. Well, we'll get to. I think there's an explanation
besides his fragile masculinity.
Yeah, I mean, there's
okay. Put a pin in that. But anyway, she's living in a real world. She has, she really needs this job.
Yeah.
She's, we see her on the subway. We actually, for a moment, like the movie is pretty much all from Peter's perspective, but we do follow Alva around little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
To see her home. There's just a scene of her just like sitting on the subway. Actually, I think it's cross-cut with that scene of him smashing up his apartment.
Yes.
And then you see Alva on the subway, a really like a dangerous subway. They make a joke about it because that's why she keeps a gun.
Yeah.
On Pelham, and she gives some change to one of the guys who's
panhandler.
Like she doesn't have a lot of money, but she's giving. It's just like a sweet little scene, and then you see that her like she lives with her parents and her brother, and like her life is really hard, and Peter's making it so much harder for no reason whatsoever. But anyway, that's all to say that like this movie is like on another planet for 90% of the time. Except for when you do just step into the shoes of Alva or another character.
Yeah, it's like watching two narratives happen simultaneously. That's one of the keys to the movie. I think the other key is to trying to understand like why is it he's acting this way? Okay, so what is he trying to embody? And earlier I mentioned some of the emotional states. Why is this character like undergoing those emotional states? What do they represent in him and his sort of situation in the world? I think it's telling that the two main real women he interacts with. Well, I guess the psychologist as well. Okay, so there's three women he interacts with who are real. Then of course there's the vampire lady played by Jennifer Beals. But two out of the three women he primarily interacts with are his girlfriend and Alva, his secretary, which are both women of color. And I think that he almost never interacts with men in this movie. Almost never. I mean, there's some scenes with him and men, but it's mostly him with women. And I think that's telling in that I think he is portraying or embodying a kind of white male perspective on the world. And this is 1988. This is the time when, in New York, right? This is the time when if you were a white dude who went to college, you kind of rule the world in a way. Like you get to just come out of college, you've got jobs lined up for you. He works as like in a publishing company.
Right. He tells his girlfriend he works in literature.
Yeah.
Literature. But yeah, he seems to be in a publishing house and he does zero
He does
work.
nothing. He does nothing. He's basically just there because he's a white dude. Like he has a nice apartment and he goes out and parties every night. Like he has nothing. There's nothing exciting in his life, really, right? Like there's no worries. He's got no concerns. He also has nothing to look forward to in a way. He's sort of in this kind of rut of like, I've got all my needs met, and like, what else is there in life? And I think that that's what leads him to be this guy who's so frustrated, both in his love life. But he's also frustrated, I think, in the fact that I think for him, life is rather meaningless. Like he's basically just been living out this life, the same life he's been living probably since high school of like, You go do your stuff at school, and then you go out and party with your friends, and there are no consequences to anything because you have all your needs met. And there's nothing. It's like, this it? That's all there is to life? And I think he's, maybe come to that realization for himself and realize like, okay, well, what do I do? Right. So I think he's a deeply depressed individual who, but I think his depression embodies culturally
Mhm.
a kind of malaise at the center of upper middle class, waspy, white New York elite people.
Yep.
And Nicolas Cage specifically chose this kind of strange mid-Atlantic accent. And I think that's telling that he did that. He wants to present, like, the characters, he talks about it as presenting the character as being sort of erudite and
Speak
upper
with
class.
distinction.
Yeah. But I think in a way, what it really does is it allows him to be a stand-in for a certain bourgeois class.
Mhm.
Like, he's not a person, he's the entire class
Mm,
of
mhm.
people, of this sort of white men of a certain breed or whatever, a
Right.
certain like caste. And I think that is like, then from that perspective, you say, okay, well, like, now you've got this guy who goes to work and does absolutely nothing, goes out with his girlfriend and then like ditches her, right? He just treats her like crap over and over again. And harasses his secretary. And like, why is he doing this? Well, I think it's just because he can. Like, he's like has the power to do it. And he's like, I'm just going to do it because like I have nothing else interesting in my life going on. So he invents this problem. You need to find the Der Spiegel file, and it's really shown again and again in the movie that doesn't matter. But yet he tortures Alva with it. And she's kind of, her life is made absolutely miserable, basically because this guy just has nothing better to do.
Right. Yeah. So he invents a problem for Alva, and he invents a fantasy for himself.
That's right. That he becomes a vampire.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a way also that's him inventing a kind of victimhood status for himself, that he's the victim of, because he's bitten by Jennifer Beals, the vampire, and then he's sort of cursed with this thing. But I think it's all obviously fantasy. And I think why does he invent that? He needs something to make his life interesting. He needs to have some consequences for his actions. And he's constantly looking for consequence, right? He asks Alva to kill him. He asks, he basically is asking everyone to kill him at various points.
He asks
in the
Alva
movie.
multiple times to kill him.
And he wants consequences for his actions, and yet they're nowhere to be found. So, for instance, in a particularly, it's played comically, but it's obviously a very horrible thing. He chases Alva into the bathroom, and like she's terrified that like he's gonna assault her or something, and he doesn't. He just turns and leaves. And then like almost the next scene, right, is like him in the boardroom with all the other white guys, and they're all just laughing
with his
about
bros.
it. They're all just laughing and like saying like, haha, she asked for a raise. Can you believe that? Like this is just silly locker room stuff or whatever. And no consequences.
Nope. No, none whatsoever. Yeah. And the men excuse it for sure. The women excuse it too. I mean, there's at one point, he's just being an asshole, walking around the office. I think he dumped somebody's like, they got like a decoration on their desk, and he throws it in the trash.
Throws it, yeah.
and the woman just like turns to Alva, and she's like, he's so eccentric.
That's
like he's assaulting people in the bathroom, but yeah, he's eccentric.
He's eccentric. That's how you think. But of course, what can they do? The secretaries have effectively no power, and because they go and complain to the boss, and the boss does absolutely nothing about it. The boss just they just laugh it off, and they're just like a big joke to them. That's a nice segue to the assistant, where something very similar happens to the main character Jane, where she goes to HR, right? And
yeah. So Jane finally decides she's had enough. There's enough circumstantial evidence that there's been something going on where she thinks the boss is taking perhaps sexual advantage of a new intern, a new girl, and she goes to HR. And an HR, the man, he says, "Oh, I'm here for you. Anything you have to tell me. This is my job." But he pretty much quashes it immediately, intimidates her, makes her feel stupid for, he sort of breaks down her
the complaint. He's like, "Yeah, what's your evidence?" And she's like, "Okay, so you heard a bunch of people joking about something, and
he's like, wait,
you found an earring on the floor,
and like that's what you want me to write up?"
Yeah.
So he makes her feel like completely unmoored and silly and stupid, and acts like he doesn't understand any of the implications that she's saying, which he totally does. And he basically says, like, "You're gonna throw away your career if I file this. I can file it, but just so you know, like, that's it for you."
Yeah, but then he does this thing, I think, which is just brilliant writing, which is he says, like, "What are your career aspirations?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? He flips it. And then she's like, "Well, I want to be a producer." And he's like, "That's great. We need more women producers. It's a tough job, but I can see like you've got a lot of promise."
He does laugh a little bit when she says producer for a quick sec.
That's true.
And
then
he's like, "Oh, that's great."
Right. He does.
Great.
Yeah, he says the things he needs to say,
Mm-hmm.
right? To like keep her on the line. And then, and it's like, he basically is just intimating that, like, you want to throw away your career aspirations over 2 lines on my yellow pad?
Everybody's always telling her that this is like a really important job, that she's really lucky to have this job.
Yep.
And
he makes that really clear, because he's like, there's 400 people in a drawer that want your job.
Yeah. Her parents are so proud of her for having this job. So they're simultaneously sort of threatening her career and dangling a career in front of her, if she just sort of shuts her mouth and deals with it.
What can you do? I mean, so she withdraws the complaint. And anyway, I just think the exact same thing happens effectively in both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the complaint is, brought to light, not lodged in the assistant case, but brought to light, and then it's just immediately quashed. And you don't see that happen in Vampire's Kiss, but you see the aftermath where they're laughing about it.
Yeah.
And you could just imagine the same thing in the assistant, where like later, like the boss is meeting with the HR guy, and it's like, can you believe she tried to do this?
Yep. And both in The Assistant and in Vampire's Kiss, the way that these women are sort of like maybe gaslit, but with the way that they're kind of kept on the line in the midst of all this abuse, is that there's like periodically times where they're being sweet talked or praised in order to kind of like keep them there. The boss and the assistant keeps telling her she's so smart, she's such a hard worker. Yeah. And then at the same time, Peter Lowe is also like hot and cold with Alva. And so there's times where she thinks like, maybe I just overreacted.
Yep.
Maybe this is like not so
nowhere
bad.
Clear is that when she is, after being like, assaulted or whatever by him, and she's just like, I fed up with it. I can't go into work. And she pretends to be sick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes to her house. He takes a cab up to her house, and he's like super sweet to her. Brings her soup. He's
like, I don't care about this file.
He's like, it doesn't matter.
I care about your health.
And she's like, oh, I didn't realize, like, I thought the file meant everything. And he's like, no, it doesn't matter. I just care about you. And she's like, okay. He's like, well, if you're feeling okay, maybe you can just come back to work with me. I'll take you door to door. We'll get all the way back. And then like, once she's trapped in the cab with him, he like he goes completely wild again.
Right.
And he's just
but
like,
before that, even he's sort of like talking to her about how she's smart. And like, he's like, when you're in a position of power,
right? Yeah.
He's like, it's hard up here at the top. Sometimes we lose our temper, you know. And he says like, when you're in a position of power, he like makes it like feel like she's got a future in this firm if she does everything he wants her to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But then he snaps and just starts screaming at her.
Yeah, he loses it in the cab, and it's actually kind of funny, but he just goes completely insane.
It's horrible when there are tensions between employer and employee, Alva. But sometimes the pressures, they just build up. Wait till you get into a position of authority.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I ever do.
You will, Alva. You're a very bright girl. That's how I know that today, by God, is the day you're going to find that damned Heatherton contract.
I thought you said that you didn't care if Mr. Heatherton left the agency. I mean, I thought you said that everything took time.
But Alva, that doesn't mean we're gonna stop trying to do the best damn job we can. The work's not just gonna go away, Alva. It never just goes away. The goddamn contract is somewhere in those goddamn fucking files!
But I was thinking with the two of them, with these two movies, and with that kind of hot and cold treatment about like abusive spouses. Like that's like, isn't that the stat? Is that like they're like 60% nice? You know, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it just
obviously
keeps
not
you
a stat,
keeps you
but
on
enough,
and long,
right?
enough,
Yeah, to think like, oh, we're turning a corner. Like that was a one-time thing. He was irritable.
He
that one time. He
apologized.
apologized. Right? Exactly.
Yeah. There's another way of thinking about it, which is like, why vampirism, right? As opposed to like, I don't know, why wasn't he a werewolf, or why wasn't he like a, I don't know what other creature he could be, or why isn't he just like, imagine himself as like a superhero or something? Like, why a vampirism? And I think it might be partly because white men of a certain class like to think of themselves as if they attain their position purely through their own work, right? Like they're like, look, man, I worked really hard. I got good grades. I didn't get distracted. And to an extent, they're absolutely right. I mean, of course, they did those things, and it was not easy, and there were sacrifices that were made along the way. But of course, on the other hand, they had family wealth. They benefited from let's just use some concrete examples. They benefited from, like, say, SAT tutoring, or they benefited from not having to have a summer job so they could study for their tests and so on. And they had all kinds of societal benefits.
Okay.
And
so how did that connect to vampirism?
But the connection is that vampires are parasites, right? They require the blood of human beings. It's not just that they require the blood of human beings. A standard trope in vampire movies, I was thinking about this earlier, is that they are parasitic also in the sense of they need human companions. So often the vampire will bring people into the vampire's fold, right? They like bring people in. I was thinking a little bit about this because of the movie The Hunger, where this is explicit. Like, this is what, like, these vampires, they live so long, and they kind of want to, all their friends end up dying off, so they're kind of constantly needing to bring in new people, right, into the family, so to speak. And so they're parasitic in that regard, in that they're always using people. But on the other hand, they're powerful. Of course, they have certain powers and things, so they sort of regard themselves as greater than the humans. And yet they need them, right? So it's a very similar relationship of these sort of, I don't know, CEO type white guys who like think of themselves as better than their assistants. And yet they totally need their assistants to function. Like, they need them. And in this case, Peter not only needs Alva to like do his job for him, basically, but like also to like be a punching bag for him as he, works out his weird, issues. And so, yeah, I think it is this, like, that's a theme that I think is kind of bound up with vampirism in particular. I don't know if you, maybe it's reaching. I don't know.
No, that makes sense to me. I would buy that. I mean, more than, I don't know why he'd be a werewolf.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just thinking about like his like the power dynamics between him and women in this movie. But I wonder, it is interesting that in his vampire fantasy, he concocts a woman who dominates him. I'm not sure.
The vampire herself.
That's
right.
Right. He's kind of groveling to her all the time.
Yeah.
And there's scenes where, because I guess we know his MO is that he like has sex with a woman and then is like, you need to leave. But like he's always like he's like pretending that she's still there the next morning. He's bringing her coffee and like singing to her.
Yeah, his fantasy weirdly involves a domestic life.
Yes.
But then he does nothing to actually do anything that you would need to attain that domestic life. Like, he's not a good partner to his girlfriend.
No, I mean, he has this obsession with like true love or real love, both he's drawn to it, but he's also repulsed by it. He's watching people kiss in the park. He is sitting in a diner, and when they're, some women behind him are talking about like a proposal, he like freaks out and leaves. Like he can't stand it. And he keeps talking about how he needs real love. And he has a fantasy at one point in which the taxi driver and his wife show up in his office. So he has this like obsession with love, but like he makes no steps in his real life whatsoever to actually attain it.
Yeah, I think he thinks it just should happen.
Yes.
And
yeah, maybe that's the thing. He doesn't feel like he should have to work for anything at all.
Work for anything. Yeah. I think it should just happen. Like women should just be, I mean, in a way they are, but like they should just sort of be at his service. Right.
But yet he concocts a woman for whom it's the other way around.
Right. Well, I think my read on that, but I'm curious what you think, is that is part of him trying to find status as a victim.
I see.
So that he can feel sort of by feeling a victim, he can feel better about the fact that his life actually does suck.
I see.
I don't know, but
he can find like he has like a reason now for his deep unhappiness that he can point to.
Yeah, but I mean, but maybe the more you mention that it that this sense of something about power and about his power relationships between him and women. I mean, I think maybe my initial analysis might be too shallow. I think is there more to be plumbed here?
I mean, I do wonder. There are men who have a fantasy about being dominated.
Yeah, but then why does he insist on effectively dominating
every
other women in his life?
Right. Except for in this like fantasy world in which he is a vampire.
Yeah, like so maybe the idea is like he wants the women in his life to actually stand up to him. I don't know. But like what the reason for that? I mean,
sort of. At one point, he's yelling at Alva.
I mean, he does want Alva to kill him.
He wants Alva to kill him, right?
Yeah,
he has
but she can't kill him because she doesn't have bullets in the gun.
Well, but at one point he's screaming at her and she's in his office and she leaves and he kind of says under his breath, "Don't you want to use your gun?"
Yeah.
Like he's like torturing her like just to try and goad her into hurting him.
Yeah.
But like she really can't. I mean, not just because she doesn't have bullets, but because like that's not how the society works. No. Like she can't actually touch him. Like nothing she can do matters.
Yeah. See, that's why I think of it like he has to invent, to be a victim, it has to be a fantasy. And that's what I think is, talking about this movie 30 years on or so, we have a number of, people supporting the current president who see themselves as victims, right? And they see themselves as victims partly because the society has culturally has changed in certain ways, and they're no longer allowed to act with impunity in certain regards. But I think that victimhood notion I think it's empowering in a weird way. But I think it's also interesting that, of course, that is as much a fantasy as the victimhood that he imagines for himself. And I do wonder in a certain way whether his invention, like whether this movie is commenting on something which, they foresaw in like white men basically like going to imagine themselves victims. And sort of saying like, look, like they might want to do this because it gets certain psychological benefits, but I mean, it is ultimately would be a total fantasy for them to do it. Like there's no victimhood here. It's purely made up. It's as made up as vampires are.
Right. And I think like the reflections keep flip-flopping because like the funny thing about him is that he keeps creating and then sort of destroying or like sabotaging his own fantasies.
Yeah.
Right. So like and the end is just like absolutely incredible.
Well, the end is our favorite part.
We love the end so much. But so he has after he's murdered a woman, he's completely disconnected with reality and he's just like wandering the streets and he's having a fake conversation with his therapist in his head. And she brings him the perfect woman.
Yeah, she says, "Oh, it turns out that you just needed love.
And like, if I had known,
patient.
Yeah, right. We could have saved you so much time. The next patient is exactly your fit. Like, how wonderful."
Sharon, this is Peter Lowe.
Hi.
Hi.
I like poetry, horseback riding, Vivaldi,
and long weekends in the country.
Those are exactly the same things that I like. Wait a minute. We walked along while bright and red uprose the rising sun.
Wordsworth.
Incredible.
I guess you two won't be needing me anymore.
I guess not. Thank you so much, Dr. Glazer. This one's going to last, I can tell.
It was written on the stars.
Written in the stars, yes. Hey, do you like Japanese food, Sharon?
It's the best. So refreshing.
You see that? We're on exactly the same wavelength.
So he creates the perfect woman for himself in his fantasy, and then within 5 minutes they're fighting.
Yeah, within 5 minutes, not only are they fighting, he's like berating her and like tells her to like leave.
It's a long story. I was a vampire. It's a difficult time in my life. End of subject. Okay. Pause. And then he's like, Sharon? God damn it! What did I just say?
No, but
and then he's like, it's only been like 10 minutes. You just start off with this shit. Peter, why did you become a vampire? Peter, does this mean we can never have children? Peter, can't you just be normal?
You just keep harping and harping over the same goddamn thing. Why'd you become a vampire? Why can't you be normal? Get the hell out of here, you fucking pig! Leave me the fuck alone! I really can't handle these relationships. Maybe I should see a shrink.
That's great. I love it.
Like, God damn it!
So wonderful.
And he's like,
scene.
oh, what? You hate my guts? I think you should leave. It's incredible.
I mean, it's amazing. How could you think like, first of all, it's like this character is so bad. He's such an evil person.
Yeah.
He's such a horrible person.
Can't even get along with his fantasy wife.
Yeah, it's like he's the anti-hero of like all anti-heroes. And but it's also so funny. And I don't know, it's such pastiche. I love it.
So that's one way in which his fantasy collapsed on itself, like almost immediately. The other thing is that if in fact he created this whole vampirism thing in order to be a victim, he then absolves himself of all consequences in the same scene with the therapist, because he confesses to the therapist. He says, well, the thing is, I did murder somebody. First he admits to rape.
Yeah, he's like, I raped someone.
I raped somebody. The thing is, I raped somebody. And he's like, I lost control. And I don't know why I'm like turning it into like a completely different accent. But anyway, and she says, she's like, it's just like a little bit of id. Like
she's like, it's a little id release.
A little id release. Nothing to worry about. And then he's like, oh, cool. Also, I murdered somebody. And she's just like, people get murdered all the time. It's basically, she's just like, whatever. And so like, if he wanted to have some real consequence or drama in his life, it's all gone now.
Yes, Peter?
Well, I did rape someone a couple nights ago. Girl at the office, I just lost control.
It's just a little id release, no use to worry.
Well, the fact is I did murder someone last night. I turned into a vampire. It's a long story.
But the amazing thing about that is like, of course it's complete fantasy and absurd. And at this point he's had like a real like psychotic break. But also, I mean, men of a certain privilege don't get away with murder, maybe.
No, but I was thinking Trump would brag about, shooting someone on the street. He's like, I could shoot someone and
nothing would happen.
Yeah, nothing would happen.
But I mean, in rape, yes. I think there's a lot of examples. Or just general poor treatment of women or other people in their life over and over again. Like we saw the men laughing about it in the boardroom, and like it's a pastiche and it's a joke that she's like, whatever. It's a little id release. But I think it is not far off from the boys will be boys mentality that we've had for so long. I think that's what's amazing about this movie, is that there's like, it's he's having fantasies that are not really all that fantastical, that then like collapse on themselves. He's like frustrating his own fantasies within fantasies. It's like, it's so crazy. But it's like, it's really getting at something.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to say about this that I liked a lot is, this sort of environment of enabling and complicity that she's a part of, which is not just falling along gender lines. Because I think in Vampires Kiss, it's very much like the men are laughing about it. The woman does say, there is one woman who's like, oh, isn't he eccentric? But it feels like it's like the men who are kind of closing ranks or circling, like the locker room talk, and like it's men versus women, or there's a real divide there. Whereas it like every single person in this company, in The Assistant, is at the service at like enabling this boss for doing what he's doing, his like serial.
They all know, and
they all know.
have to just
they're
go
all
along.
okay with it in their own ways, and like they do it differently. Like the men laugh about it, like they like the men in the boardroom in Vampires Kiss is the same thing. It's sort of like a broy, like, oh, it's just like that time in Sundance. But the women justify it in a different way. The women tell themselves that in fact, like these women are making their own choice, and that like at one point, an older woman in the company says, like, trust me, this woman, who some new ingenue has gone to his office. And the other colleague says, like, she'll get more out of it than he will, trust me. So she's sort of like justifying, rationalizing in her head is that like this woman is just making a career choice for herself.
They're making their own choices. Like it's they're empowered women making their own decisions, and this is the world they live in. But it's an exchange, but I mean, the thing that that's absolutely horrifying about The Assistant isn't that the character Jane is sexually assaulted or harassed. I mean, maybe she's psychologically harassed a little bit, but she's never sexually harassed. But the thing that's absolutely horrible is that she's morally compromised, that she's brought in and forced to play along and enable this behavior, which she finds morally repulsive. Like she brings one of the women to the hotel, and where he's like gonna meet with her, and she is the one who's like having to cover for him when his wife is looking for him and stuff. And so those sort of things, it's like it's a wrong that's done to her, it's a harm done to her at a moral level, right? It's that she now has to like compromise her own values to be a part of this. And that I think is an interesting angle on the idea of the bystander, and like, what do you by being a bystander to this, you are somehow complicit, and that puts you in this really compromised position. And
we don't know what she's gonna do at the end of the movie. If she's going to walk away from it or quit. I mean, she doesn't quit on screen, but like, does she go in the next day and quit, or does she like ride it out, in the hopes of becoming a producer? But it does feel like the more likely thing is that she rides it out. Just because like what she goes to a studio next door, it's going to be the same story. I think that's kind of the feel. And
but all the things are pointing her in that direction. Her parents, it's not just the people in the office. Her parents are like, oh, we're so proud of you. You're so lucky to have this job. It's such a prestigious job. I mean, like, it's not like, it's not like she's got anyone saying, don't go to that hellhole.
No. Yeah. And the thing about like you can sort of start to see like she's drawing lines for herself. Like there's a one point where the wife calls and the two other assistants are like, say he's in a screening. Cause that way, like she, that's something that you can't pull him out of, and she'll know that. And Jane says like, I'm not going to lie to her. So she just kind of like digs in her heels by saying like, I don't know where he is. I don't have him right now. I don't have him right now. She just keeps repeating that because she won't like bring herself to outright lie, but she does kind of know where he is. She's finding like some moral line for how to like feel okay about that. But you do feel like if she continues to like live in that space, it's just going to get chipped away and chipped away and chipped away until she's like this older colleague who's just like bringing people to him, late at night and like just being like, ugh, here we go.
Yep. I mean, they're brought,
and I don't think the movie judges her for that either.
Oh no, the movie has no judgment of her. Absolutely, the movie is just like portraying her as in an impossible situation.
Yep.
And the question is left open. What does she do? And I think that is in a way the question that we're supposed to be thinking about. Just like, well, what should she do? And it's a very hard question because she has personal career aspirations, and I'm reading it in such a way where let's just suppose there aren't any other options. Like, that's it. This is her job. It's producing by working for this guy, and the chance of producing at least by working for this guy, or pick a new career path, like, and I think that makes it just that's what's wrong. The wrong here is done to her. And now she is in a position where to realize her goals, she has to do things that are wrong, at least by her lights, and I think by most people's lights.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, her wrongs are less, but they're nonetheless, it's wrong to like enable a serial sexual assaulter to do this kind of behavior. And and I think that's like a really, it would be bad if the movie judged her for her choice, right? But I think the movie just wants to like let it be open, because it's not really about this character's choice. It's more about what are we as an audience like thinking about. And I think in the end, actually, the movie, there's one question is like, well, what would you do? But then or what should she do? But there's this other thing, which I think the movie wants you to really reflect on, which is like, isn't this society that puts people in this position and enables this kind of thing, empowers this guy to do this sort of thing? Isn't that kind of like a messed up society that we don't want to live in? Like, this is like a bad thing. And like, that's where the judgment comes in, if anywhere. And then,
Yeah. I mean, I think this movie is roughly based on, or the boss character is roughly based on Harvey Weinstein, although I think there are many, 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 many bosses like this in the world. But the thing that's kind of like overwhelming, I read the Ronan Farrow Catch and Kill book about his experience reporting on Harvey Weinstein. And the thing that just you come away with is like how impossibly hard it would be for any of those women in that situation to say or do anything at all. Not until like many, many years later, when there's this like collective storytelling, when everybody, like enough women have to like fall on the sword, sacrifice. They've all lost their careers. Many of these people that are telling their stories at this point, they've all walked away and just sort of
they walked away. Like their career was destroyed by them not refusing to be complicit in this.
Right. But they wouldn't be believed at the time. They can walk away and just like have that, for their own reasons, because they don't want to be complicit in something, but nobody's ever going to believe them, because this man has, an incredible network of people propping him up, journalists and PR people and HR and like the whole network of Hollywood and beyond, supporting and enabling this behavior in the system.
Well, we're not going to solve the evils of the patriarchy here, and
no.
But
we're just trying to get you to watch some fun Nick Cage movies.
Yeah, the Cage aspect is really the selling point, and the bonus is that it's a wonderful satire of an absolutely horrible situation, which is our current life situation. The current situation of, as the assistant has depicted very clearly, of young women, especially women of color in this world, who are struggling to find their way up in a career and gain success and have stability,
and not compromise their values and or get assaulted,
and not lose themselves in the process.
Yeah.
And man, it's tough.
It is.
But I'm glad that there's art in the world that can address these issues in the case of Vampire's Kiss, a very metaphorical, non-literal, impressionistic way, because I think sometimes it's very difficult to have conversations about this stuff, as you see in The Assistant, how difficult it is to put in words what in your bones is happening. And so one of the powers, I think, of filmmaking in particular is that since it's not a medium that requires words, you can show things rather than tell. And sometimes that showing can be quite powerful and persuasive in a way that trying to then articulate it in words can often fail. That said, I mean, the motto of this podcast is to articulate those things. And I think that
we're trying.
I think it's I think that's where we take the Herzogian dictum seriously, in that we don't want to just have this feeling that, or whatever experience that we have watching the movie and then just leave it at that. We do want to attempt to articulate what it is that's going on and how that relates to our experience in the world, the social ills, political stuff, moral issues, philosophical matters. I think that is what the best art can do, is it can provide a groundwork for us to then sort of reckon with and try to find ways of thinking about. And yeah, surprise, surprise, that a weird offbeat dark comedy from 1988 serves as a really fruitful text.
Yeah.
in this
We spent a
regard.
lot of time, not just on this podcast, but you and me talking about Vampire's Kiss.
Yeah, and also doing
Just
doing
doing-
it, doing the ABCs.
Doing the ABCs, doing, Peter. A lot of that.
That's the thing too. I do wonder sometimes whether the like the comedy element helps the horror, like the satire and what's horrible about the thing that's being satirized go down, right?
Mhm.
And then without the comedy element, that movie might have been an unbearable watch.
Yeah.
Much in the way that I found the
We're not going to be rewatching The Assistant all the
Assistant,
time.
excuse me. Yeah,
It's a bummer.
Yeah, it's a hard watch. I mean, I felt like a certain physical feeling in the pit of my stomach after that movie that I don't feel very often, and just this feeling of claustrophobia almost. Just like I feel just feeling trapped, and that is a feeling that I'm sure many people do feel like on a daily basis. And it's absolutely horrible, but it's not the kind of thing you might want to willingly seek out on a regular basis. So in a way, I think the comedy helps, right? Because it sort of is it's the what is it? The word, the honey that goes with
A spoonful of sugar?
the spoonful of sugar. You need that spoonful of sugar sometimes.
Yeah. I'm here for you with the Mary Poppins reference.
Yep. So Vampire's Kiss, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. It's a fun movie, and
have
you
your
can-
cockroach and eat it too.
Oh, cockroach scene. That was a classic. It's not a cockroach, it's a water bug.
Well, okay. It's gross,
He did eat
whatever it is.
Yeah. So trigger warning on this movie, he eats a water bug. There's rape. I mean, the rape is implied. And
Yeah, I actually didn't even know he had raped her until afterwards when he said he did. But
Yeah, I mean,
anyway.
it's pretty implied.
Yeah.
And
Neither here nor there.
I mean,
Still triggering.
Yeah, it's triggering.
Assault.
But it's also weirdly funny. I mean, that's what you get with dark comedies, right? You're getting this mixture of things, and they're not trying to make light of the horrifying things that are being depicted. Rather, they're trying to provide a lens that allows us to be able to even watch that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy to watch.
I think this movie walks an amazing line.
Yeah.
I mean, did not work for other people, clearly.
Clearly.
It's something.
But I think that's the thing, is that's why I think the fact that this movie works better now than it did then tells us something about like the audience ability to receive a movie like this now, which is, it just tells us something about ourselves. 30 years on, I think we're ready for a movie that satirizes these things this directly and this bleakly in a way, and makes fun of them, right? In that way. Which I just think audiences in 88 are just, there's no way. They're too close. They're just too close to the source. And I just think, but now we have that distance. Of course, we're in the Me Too era. And so now people are sort of primed to be able to process this kind of thing, I think, or whatever. Okay. So, all right. So thanks for listening. The next episode is Titanic. So we're shifting gears a little bit to do a more classic love story, which is Top for Laura, as hinted at in an earlier in the Terminator 2 episode. We hinted.
So
at
excited!
This. I'm really excited for Titanic actually, because I haven't seen it in a long time, and I'm excited to revisit it.
Are you ready to go back to Titanic?
Is that what it is? Is that what that was the tagline when they re-released it? Well,
Bill Paxton says.
Oh, nice. Okay, well,
he asked Rose if she's ready to go back to Titanic.
We are. I am ready because I haven't been back in there in a while actually, and there's a certain.
You can still smell the fresh paint.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain thing that Titanic is doing about like. Anyway, let's not get into it.
No.
Okay, so next is Titanic, and after that, Forrest Gump, and that will complete the this kind of run of movies that we're doing, and then we'll have to figure out what we're gonna do in the fall. We got a lot of ideas, and we'll be taking suggestions. So if you do have suggestions for us, You can tweet us at cowspod on Twitter, or leave a comment on the posts on cowspod.wordpress.com. And otherwise, subscribe on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.